You're listening to the Awakened Feminine podcast. I'm your host, 𝐓𝐫𝐞𝐲. Welcome. Each week, I'll be chatting with thought leaders from around the world as they share the love and wisdom they've picked up along the way in this journey called life. Whether it be their stories, lessons, tips, or expertise in the field, you'll be sure to get your weekly dose of inspiration and tools on how to lead a soul-aligned life. Let's go. The beautiful Tracey Brown with me. Tracey is the co-founder of the Women Writing Intentionally Collective, a certified Moonologer and Lunar business strategist who holds a deep-rooted passion for empowering spiritual women to amplify their voices through the sharing of divine, feminine, and sacred ancestral wisdom. I'm so excited to have you back, Tracey. Welcome.
I'm so excited to be back here with you, 𝐓𝐫𝐞𝐲. It's been like a little minute since we last had an opportunity to catch up and talk all things books and publishing.
I know it has been a while. I didn't actually go and check when you were last year, but it has been a while. Definitely more than 8 months since it's been 8 months since I had my last podcast episode. So
Yeah, I feel like it was probably just before Christmas that we had maybe our 1 year anniversary of our podcast episode. And it was actually, I'm pretty sure we did it in the lead up to the publication of Prosperity Codes, which we were in together.
yes, yeah. Well, that would
So
have been
that's
ages ago. That's 2022.
well, yeah, 1st of May is 2 years. Can you believe it?
That's pretty crazy. And I always have this next to me, so I can just shamelessly plug a book. Books.
Love it.
So this is Prosperity Codes, and this is how I met Tracey. So yeah, it was just a really great book and a fun time that we had together, writing stories and sharing our stories about prosperity. So
It was a super fun time. That was actually such a great book. The vibe and the group of women that were writing together was really great. Everybody's stories showcased what prosperity meant in different ways, and it's really funny because I don't know about you, because we've both since gone on to become publishers. And I think for me, Prosperity Codes was also a catalyst in many ways for me to realize what it was that I wanted to replicate in a publishing house, because I'd done books in other book containers before, and I'd been in book containers that were all women and mixed books, and the energy and the vibe was completely different. And I just, being in Prosperity Codes and being in an all-female container again, really crystallized for me that working with women and writing with women and holding a safe space for women was really important for me. And then, yeah, so with one of my co-authors from Aligned Leaders, which was my first book, which was the other all-female book container that I'd been in. So Jenny and I we both got into publishing at the same time, decided to launch our first books together. She was doing Quiet and Badass, and I was doing Lunar Wisdom. And I was helping her on the back end doing publishing support for her. And we were talking about all kinds of things that we wanted to do in publishing and things that were different than the models we had been exposed to. And the Women Writing Intentionally Collective was born, and the Wounded Women series, which is a series of 3 books that we've just finished publishing. Burned just came out in January. So it's really interesting that Prosperity Codes for me was one of those catalyst moments that really shone a light on, this is exactly how showing me what I wanted in publishing in terms of the kinds of people I wanted to work with.
I didn't know you weren't a publisher before Prosperity Codes, so that's so interesting because Prosperity Codes, yeah, you go.
I mean, I didn't have my own publishing house, but I was doing back-end publishing support and had done for several books with my other publisher. So prior to doing Prosperity Codes, the publisher I had been working with, I had helped her to produce 3 books. So doing Quiet and Badass was my 4th publication. And then Lunar Wisdom, which was my first official baby that I published under my own masthead, was actually my 5th book that I published, but it was also something like the 5th or 6th book that I actually wrote in. Yeah.
I love that.
So,
Because Prosperity Codes also set me off to partner with a publisher, which led me to the Awakened Feminine. So I was doing the front end, then I had a publisher doing all the back end stuff. And then which then launched me to starting my own publishing company. And I mean, you know, you and I, we just both love stories and we know the value of sharing our stories, especially in this crazy time in the world that's happening at the moment. So yeah, I'm just really excited about our conversation because reconnecting with our voices, it means so much to me. And I know obviously it means like a lot to you for you to, you know, have that as our teaser title for this episode. But before we jump in, I want to ask you this question. I always ask this question and you've answered it before, but I know it's an ever evolving phenomenon, the awakened feminine. So I want to know from you, what does that term mean to you in this particular chapter of your life?
well, yeah, so that's interesting. I'd have to go back and watch our past podcast episode again to see how I answered last time. But I feel like so much has evolved, like you say, in that period of time, even in the last year or year and a half since we spoke last. The awakened feminine really, for me, has amplified a lot more in my life and the kinds of women that I've worked with. And so I guess what the awakened feminine means to me is that intrinsic feminine energy in us, the reawakening of the knowledge and the wisdom and the power that we as women have held for so long, that has been suppressed for so long because of the structure of our patriarchal societies that has really devalued women's knowledge and power and women holding knowledge and power for so long. And I mean, someone was celebrating on Facebook recently, it was only like 50 years ago that women could hold a credit card without having a man co-sign for it. And I look at the journeys that our mothers, not even like our grandmothers or our great grandmothers, but our mothers went through. I know and we're both Perth girls originally. Like my mom in the 70s, before I was born, she couldn't buy property without her income didn't count. And that was something that I shared in Prosperity Codes. Like, this is a big thing, that women's voices didn't count. And so the awakened feminine to me, I guess, is this societal shift that's been happening, where as women and as a society, we're feeling that shift, that women are saying, hang on a minute, this isn't like, it's not that we don't have value in the conversation. It's not that we're not empowered or capable of leading either. Like, women in leadership roles is still an ongoing battle to have a seat at the table. So the awakened feminine for me is really, I guess, it's the collective healing of women deciding that we want to break these generational chains and generational cycles that have held us back. But it's also this recognition that there is a different way to do things, that we can choose to lead with love and compassion, that we can choose to look for the best possible outcomes for everyone, that also, that, to use a phrase like that, self-care isn't selfish, that actually we need to put our own oxygen masks on first before we're any good to anybody, because as women as a collective, but also for those of us who have been, are wives, mothers, it's always been about putting everybody else first to the detriment of ourselves. And the awakened feminine is really about recognizing that we can't be the best partners, the best mothers, the best business owners, or whatever, if we are constantly deprioritizing our own mental health, our own needs, our own desires, our own ambitions. Like, ambition isn't a dirty word for women. Men have ambition and don't feel guilty about it whatsoever. But a woman who wants more than she's offered, God forbid, right? So I guess for me, that's what the awakened feminine means. It's this divine feminine uprising of female warrior healers who are coming to shift that paradigm and bring that collective healing, bring that shift and break those generational cycles.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing what it means to you at this point. And Tracey, I know we're talking about reconnecting with our voices, and just before we came on, you're like, I have laryngitis, and and it's like, oh yeah, like you said, it was like, oh, we're talking about reconnecting with our voices. I've lost my voice before, but thank you for still deciding to continue to do this podcast, even though I know, like, you're not 100% better. Can you talk a bit more about why reconnecting our voices is so important, and why it's so important that you feel that you really want to talk about this during our podcast?
Yeah. So one of the things that I felt passionate about as a publisher, as you've already mentioned, because it's part of my bio, is that I'm really passionate about helping women to have a safe platform to express their knowledge, wisdom, and power. And because of the way that our society has been, and women have been disconnected from being able to truly and authentically express themselves or their knowledge without fear, because when we do speak up, and I know in Australia we often talk about the tall poppy syndrome, we like to cut people back down to size and put them back in their box. But it hasn't been safe for women to speak with our voices or speak our truth. We can speak a version of our truth. We can share as much as is safe, but to actually fully and unapologetically say what we mean what we say, without fear of judgment or criticism or, lynching or whatever, it takes a lot of time and effort and work and healing. And so this is one of the things that in in our recent Wounded Women series container, Jenny and I we recognized that we actually wanted to tackle this head on, right? We wanted to confront the sister wound, which is when women are pitted against women, throw each other under the bus, betray each other, do damage to each other, toxic female friendships or toxic relationships in pursuit of the end goal, because we have been trained that there's only one seat at the table. There's not enough room for everyone. So you have to do whatever it takes to get there without, doesn't matter. It's not about teamwork. And we wanted to confront that sister wound. And it was really interesting, actually, the different types of betrayal that came out in those stories, because it wasn't just being the victim of a betrayal. It was exploring the ways that we perpetrate betrayal, that we have betrayed others, but also it came out so much about how we've betrayed ourselves and how society has betrayed us. And so the first one was about the sister wound. The second one was about the mother wound. So the breakings of those generational cycles, and really like exploring and examining the stories in our past, like in our families or the beliefs or what it is, and how those have been holding us back or making us feel unsafe or making us feel unsafe to ask for more than what we're given. And then the third one was about the witch wound and the ways in which we have been persecuted, and the ways in which we have been silenced from speaking our truth. And so all three of those books, we knew when we were putting it together that this was going to bring up so much for the women, because we didn't just do one book at a time. We released them one book at a time, but we enrolled for all three. And we had some of our authors actually did all three books. And so we knew that this was going to be a big container. And we put all of our authors in together in this container. And we knew that we needed extra support for this. We knew that it was going to bring up a lot of fears, not just the regular author fears that come up, fears of being seen, fears of having your story go out into the universe. Oh my gosh, what will my mum think when she reads that? What will people think of what I have to say? Which we also knew that was, we've seen before when authors get to that point and then suddenly the book's published and it's like they disappear off the face of the planet in their businesses and everything, because they have this publication shock, kind of visibility block that comes up, and it can be devastating. But we knew that this was going to potentially bring up trauma. And so we wanted to create that safe container for them to speak their truth and reconnect with their voices and share these stories, because we knew that it was so important for collective healing, for being able to get these stories out there to change the narrative, to change lives. And so we put extra things in place for our authors to make that safe for them. One of the things that was really fabulous was we run regular writing circles. And so the authors could come along. And it wasn't so much the accountability part that was magic. I mean, that was magic. The productivity was phenomenal. But it was the in-between parts where the girls would talk about what they were struggling with their writing, where they were blocked, what was coming up for them, that they shared little snippets of their stories and they provided support for each other. And those moments were gold, because it helped them, it validated them through the writing process, it bonded them, it created that sense of community, because they were empathizing with each other, and they were, in as much as they were exposing their wounds, they were also healing each other's wounds, or providing space to be seen, to be validated. And it then made it easier in terms of their allowing the story to come out, allowing them to reconnect enough with their story to say what needed to be said, to let the words come out. But the other part was, we'd seen in other programs where people do share traumatic stories, because let's face it, some of the topics that we write about, we bring different facets of our experiences in, and everyone has some kind of traumatic story somewhere in our past, whether it's big T or little t trauma. And we'd also seen where that can, if that's not supported and handled with compassion and delicacy, that can also leave people with more problems than they came into the book container with. So we also had one of my Lunar Wisdom authors, who's an expert in somatic healing and moon circles. She came and ran sister circles for us to give the women an opportunity to do some of that release of the trauma and emotion that was stored in their bodies during the writing process. And again, there was another part that we got such incredible feedback from the women in our container that they had really strong emotional responses because the stories that they'd shared, the things that they were putting out there, but then being able to actually release it in a safe way. And so that whole concept, it really highlighted for us the importance of being able to reconnect with our voices at that deep level, and that it's not just as easy as saying, oh, just reconnect with your voice. Like, find your authenticity and truth. It's actually being willing to do the shadow work as well, and actually holding space for that healing, which is messy and it's uncomfortable and it's painful, rather than just being all toxic positivity and love and light. And let's keep things high vibe, guys. Don't share your traumas in here. Write about them, but please don't share them because it's just a program. And, I mean, we've all seen that out there, especially in the coaching world as well, that toxic positivity and like, let's not talk about trauma because we want to keep everything like positive for everybody. And quite frankly, it's spiritual bypassing. But actually, it inhibits our ability to heal and to grow in the long term. Clinically proven, they've done lots of studies on this. And so, yeah, I guess the very, very long answer to this is that, reconnecting with our voices is important from a healing perspective, because it's only by healing that we can truly allow ourselves to say the things that need to be said.
I totally resonate with everything that you said. And, very similar with, I just released Badass Asian Women in February. So that was my first baby. So, and again, it is that need to actually provide that safe space, because if you don't, it makes it you're like retelling the story and you're reliving the trauma, right? So
Exactly.
you need to have that space and support for the women who are brave enough to say yes to telling their story. The worst thing that we can do is like, tell, like you say, tell your story, but you're just left in the dumps after. You just need that continued support. And I think that's very important. And I love, that you're doing that, or your authors providing that beautiful safe space for them. So as you were talking, a few things dropped in. I wanted to ask you more about the sister wound, because I don't think there's enough talk about what that actually is, because I think a lot of women either don't believe it exists or don't even know what it means, because it just is something that happens, right? Women get pitted against each other. We don't understand why we can't connect with other women, or we don't feel safe in the presence of other women. But, obviously there's a reason for that. Can you speak a bit more about that so we can... Yeah.
It's so funny that you say that, because this is a conversation that Jenny and I've had lots of times, and that came up was initially when we talk about things like the sister wound or even the mother wound and the witch wound, we're like, oh no, I don't have that. A lot of people with this, especially when you say sister wound, they're like, I don't have a sister, or I have a great relationship with my sister. Well, they say that about the mother wound too. I have a great relationship with my mom. It's not, doesn't mean that you have. And I think the confusion is because in psychology terms, so there's like different definitions depending whether you're talking about like spiritual archetypes, and psychological things. So like the mother wound and father wound in psychology there is overlap, but it's a clinical term that has a different kind of definition. And so the sister wound very specifically does often manifest whether we realize it or not. And again, like I said, so many women like you are like, I don't know what that is. I don't have that. But when we start looking, when we start going back and examining, and it really is like what you like reliving or replaying stories throughout our childhood, throughout our lives. And this was very much what I like what I did in my chapter, and the flow of it was going back and exploring all of the different times when relationships I had with women or with friends, with whoever, were not where they were overly competitive, and not just like friendly competition or something, but like, right back to, being 5-year-old girls and some just in the playground where they're like, just because you don't have a certain toy or you don't have the right kind of thing, like you're a bad person, like pushing each other down, like, well, I'm better than you because. And we've done a lot of that. It starts as little kids. And I mean, I know you've got kids as well. I remember when my daughter was 5, I was like, oh my God, how can 5-year-old girls be so bitchy? Like, where do they learn this stuff? Like, going into a kindergarten or pre-primary classroom, like, oh my God, you watch those kids for a little while and you're like, wow, the whole queen bee thing, like, like little kids, it's part of the way that we, I guess, subconsciously start instilling these beliefs and values in. And the reason we don't recognize it is because they are so deeply ingrained. They're just so normal. We don't think about that as being a wound because this is part of how generational wounds work. They're so deeply ingrained, and I'm sure that this was something that also came up for you guys in your Badass Asian Women, that the generational wounds that women have as like within your culture as well, that comes down through the generations, but it's so normalized that trying to unpack it and trying to say, hang on a minute, this isn't normal. People are like, what do you mean? This is the way it's always been done. Why are you being the black sheep? Why are you complaining about, everybody's experienced that. That's just the way it is. And, that can be the kickback that even in our own heads, we hear this voice going, oh, but everybody has that. Everybody feels that. This isn't like, just suck it up, pull up your big girl pants and move on. But it then comes through like in our teen years, the competition between women to either academically be the best. I mean, I went to an all-girls school from years 8 to almost the end of year 11 before I had to get out. It was too much. But that sense of competition and bitchiness and clickiness, like it, and I mean, our year group was apparently the clickiest year group that our cohort that our teachers had seen. And yeah, it was just too much for me. And I guess because I didn't know at the time, but I wasn't meant to be mainstream, but that growing up in the 90s, it was like the more that you fit in, the more popular you were. The more vanilla you were, the more you could blend, the better it was, which is hilarious now that we're in our 40s and it's all about your unique selling point and being able to like stand out and not be vanilla and like really like step into who you are and let your freak flag fly. But in the 90s in Perth, don't do that. Don't do it. Be vanilla. Everyone wants it to be the same. So, like the playground politics, teenage, like high school angst and drama, all of those things just compound the sister wound, that competitiveness, competing over boys or competing over, like friends, like she's my best friend, not your best friend. All of that kind of thing. And then into the workplace, all of that bleeds into, irrespective of whether you're in, frontline retail, whether you're in corporate, it comes through as competition for promotions. It comes through as, being the one who's getting the gold star on the board as like the top salesperson of the month or whatever, where it's, and it's perpetuated in that, well, today Tracey gets a gold star because she sold a $5,000 watch, and 𝐜𝐞𝐲, you get a red dot because you only sold a $500 one. Yeah, like it's it's wild that as grown-ups, these are the things we're still gold starring and red dotting each other. So, I mean, I think if we all took the time to sit back and replay just situations through our lives, because when I was thinking about my betrayed story, I thought it was one very specific incident. I thought it was one very traumatic relationship breakdown. But then as I started writing my story and I started looking back and reflecting, it was a pattern that kept repeating in different ways and continued to escalate in terms of its magnitude, I guess. The older I got, the worse the betrayals, because we're no longer just playing for, hair ties and, boys, whatever. It's out in the world and we're staking our businesses on things. So we're, the stakes are bigger because we're older and wiser. So yeah, I think reflection is probably the catalyst to being able to unravel it in our own lives.
Yeah. It like, as you're speaking, I'm just, thinking about all my relationships and also witnessing the power play between women that I've worked with or like been friends with. And even like you said, I've got two young girls, they're 8 and 4. Man, I don't know if it's actually worse now, because if I had to go back to primary school, I think I would be crying every day after school, because some of the things that my daughter, my older one, the younger one still, not quite sure, what's happening. She's still young. But when my older one comes back and tells me some of the things, I'm like, how do these girls learn? Like you said, where do they learn it from? Like, surely it can't be their parents, or like, where are they picking it up from? And it scares me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I could, navigate the primary school playground, because it sounds terrible and frightening. Yeah, but it's just so interesting as you're talking. It I can just see all the different dynamics that I've been through in my life and go, oh yeah, yeah, there's a sister wound, and including myself. So how can we as women heal our sister wounds? I think that's very important. Like, yes, recognizing them is great, but how can we actually heal from them?
Yeah, so this is a big part of it, because recognizing it is only the first step. And this was something that in Ruth's chapter, so Ruth is our amazing editor-in-chief for the Women Writing Intentionally Collective, but she's fantastic through the publishing world as well. In her story, she actually touched on sexual assault, but that the Me Too movement allowed us to recognize things, and we could commiserate together and sympathize, but that we didn't have the tools to then continue healing. Like, it didn't change like it didn't, not on a wider, like on a societal level. And so recognition is that first step, because we have to recognize that, like you were just saying, we weren't just the victims, we were also the perpetrators, that we all have also been guilty of betraying other women, judging them. Oh my gosh, have you seen what she's wearing? Should she really be out in public wearing that? Or did she really say that? Like, we are constantly, we live in a world that thrives on judgment, reality TV, right? Like, let's be honest, we love the drama. But that's part of the problem, because we continue to pit each other, put, like our celebrities, our TV shows, everything. That's what we want to see everyone fight it out in the ring. So recognition in and of itself isn't enough. We have to then, and I'm not saying we have to go and make reparations and go and apologize to all of them. Like, it's not a 12-step program. But we do have to consciously make those choices on the everyday and catch ourselves in the moment. Part of healing it is not just recognizing, but catching ourselves and holding ourselves accountable, or with our children, to guide them to do better, to lead with compassion, to actually look at multifaceted reasons, like why somebody might be showing up like that. Maybe they're, like that whole, be kind, you never know what somebody else is going through thing. Like, even if somebody is being super bitchy or being awful to you, we don't know what is driving that. And compassion can go a long way when we are not just automatically reacting with, oh, well, she's being a bitch to me, so I'm going to be a bitch back. Like, catching ourselves really is and guiding those around us, shining that, like creating and holding inclusive spaces to allow people to be heard, but to try and do it in a I guess, being more constructive than just openly judgy or critical, like really shifting that, the ways that we communicate, the ways that we interact, and saying, but also choosing to remove ourselves from those situations and just not get into the drama. Like, yeah, might be super fun to watch with popcorn, but we don't need to wade in. Don't engage in the trolls on Facebook, right? Just scroll and move on, and just leave them to it. So I know that doesn't sound like a concrete kind of like, here are the 3 steps to overcome the sister wound and completely transform society, because it's a step-by-step process, and it does have to start with us and recognizing, like where we do have those problems, and then being proactive about, if they're trauma-based, going and seeking help, like going and finding the support that you need, rather than just holding on to that pain, allowing it to fester, leaving it. Sometimes we are all guilty of, it's scary to take that step and admit that we have a problem, or that, we're afraid to go to the doctor and hear that, that, whatever it is actually more serious than we thought. But when we go and then find out that actually it's not as bad as we thought, or that it's easily, finding the tools and the strategies that work for us. Like, again, put our oxygen masks on first, allow ourselves to maintain good mental health, which can be, again, dealing with and unpacking the traumas that we have in a safe way. And I don't just mean in book containers with healers, but, a big advocate for therapy and, doing whatever it is that we need to do to facilitate us being in a good place. Because when we take care of ourselves, we are better able then to take care of the other people around us. And if we're constantly, like, if our nervous systems are dysregulated and we're like going highs and lows. I don't know if you've seen that meme that's going around at the moment. I don't know if my kids are going to remember me as the loving, affectionate, like supportive mom or the overstimulated psycho.
No, I haven't seen it.
Um, So I've seen that one going around, and it's that perception, right? Like we sit there and we're like, oh, I love my kids, but are they going to see us like when we're high or like manic and doing all of the things, or are they going to see us when we're in tears and whatever? So yelling and
Yeah.
shouting and, go clean your room, it's time to set the table, all of the things. So yeah, it's recognition, catching ourselves, taking care of ourselves, like the self-care, like mental health, physical health, emotional, spiritual health, like putting our oxygen mask on, and then also making sure that we are with our future generations, children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, friends, godchildren, like friends of friends' kids, whoever it is, the kids we teach, whoever, the younger generations, that we are also helping them to catch themselves earlier. Again, because it's not just recognition, it's the catching and choosing to make a different choice, choosing to make a different decision. And then over time, we become so good at catching ourselves that we retrain ourselves out of those automatic behaviors.
Yeah, I love that. It's really well, first of all, it all starts with each individual, and then I love that it is, when we stop the that trauma, that sister wound from continuing playing out, that's when we can help the future generations to do that. And I mean, I'm not perfect, but I am, teaching my children to do that. And in regards to the meme, my children see all facets of me. They see the affectionate mom and they see the psycho mom.
Uh-huh.
So, and I think it's important. I think for them to recognize that there's a whole range of emotions and that is okay to express. I know sometimes when I do go a bit overboard, I do obviously apologize to my kids and explain to them what's going on, like but they're still young, so sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but in the moment I'm human and sometimes those things happen. But it's, again, that recognition, I think, with everything. And I love that also the boundary piece that you mentioned, like, yes, we can recognize it, and we can be compassionate and try and understand where that other person has come from, but we also don't need to live in that space with them. We can go, okay, sending you love, I'm gonna go this way. I think that's really important as well, because I think a lot of women stay in relationships because of loyalty. Oh, I've been friends with her for like 20 years, even though the relationship has been toxic, or you've overgiven, or vice versa. And it's again recognizing that you don't need to
Mhm.
stay in those relationships. You don't need to keep playing the victim or the savior or whatever you are in that particular relationship. um so yeah, I think it's important, like you said, that you don't need, if there's trolls, scroll through. If there's people that's making life difficult, you don't need to keep playing with them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it can be as simple as deciding, you know what, with all love, maybe you're not ready to unfriend them on Facebook. You could unfollow them. You won't see their posts anymore. You're not making that statement that, oh, Tracey's unfriended you. But you can be like, well, they don't know that I can't see their posts anymore. Um, or you can unfriend them. Like I went through, while I was writing Betrayed, And I culled a whole pile of people off my friends list that I was like, none of these friendships are serving me anymore. Like, we haven't seen each other in years, or we don't have anything in common, or whenever I see their posts, it triggers me. It makes me like, oh my God. And do you know what? The bliss, that was actually a game changer for me. I unfriended a whole pile of people whose posts annoyed the fuck out of me. Not because there was necessarily anything wrong with their posts, but they might have had a different viewpoint than I did. Like, they don't believe what I believe anymore. We've gone our separate ways. And rather than being annoyed constantly because I'm like, did you see what they posted? Now I don't see it at all. And literally the shift that made in my my anxiety levels, my when you're constantly like, oh, and it tenses you up, and it does things to your body, to your mindset, to the way you show up to everything else because you're already irritated. And just cutting out that one thing. I didn't tell them that I was unfriended them or anything like that, and just did it. Haven't had any friend requests back from them, so either they haven't noticed or they were like, yeah, didn't want to be friends with her either, which is totally fine because we've gone in different directions. But that was, oh my gosh, it was such a release. My entire body relaxed just from not seeing those things every single day. And I mean, that's an easy one to do. So easy. Unfollow pages you don't like. Unfollow or unfriend people you don't like. Simple solutions, right? But we get caught up in that, oh, but we've been friends for 20 years, or oh, but everybody else in my high school reunion is we all friended each other on Facebook because we were caught in that nostalgia moment. And we don't necessarily have to continue to hold that nostalgia moment. Sometimes it's okay to relive that memory. Like, when it comes up as like a memory on your phone, like, oh, 12 years ago, this happened on this day. Yay, amazing. And then you just let the next memory come tomorrow. So yeah, that's a good one. Just choosing to let go of those relationships. And obviously Facebook is just one example of that. Choosing to not physically socialize with people that no longer really are aligned. And I mean, to be fair, often changing jobs or having kids or being in a new relationship does tend to make some of those relationships naturally fall away when we enter different stages of life. But there is always, one that kind of hangs on that maybe has passed its use by date.
Yeah. Have you found that when the people around you no longer align with your values or your beliefs, that sometimes even when you make the effort or they make the effort, somehow something happens where you don't end up seeing each other? It's like the universe is like, come on, like, you guys are not meant to meet or talk to each
Yeah.
other.
So it is funny how that happens, organizing to catch up, and then then you get laryngitis or something happens. You get a phone call from the school, oh my gosh, your kid's just been stung by a bee. Can you come and pick them up?
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah. And just that series of unfortunate events that kind of happens, and it just never quite happens, and you always have these good intentions. And yeah, I think sometimes it is a gentle nudge from the universe that, you know what, if you were really meant to catch up, you would either make the effort because you want it enough. You actually want it enough to keep following up and keep chasing that person. But if you actually don't want it enough to overcome those obstacles, then you just weren't meant to, that it's okay to let it go.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm very thankful that even though you had laryngitis, you still made this happen.
Yeah, well, and I think I said I'm looking to head back to Perth later this year, and I'm going to hit you
Oh
up
my
for
God.
coffee and
Oh, for
prosperity
sure.
boats words prosperity codes book signing.
Oh, yes. Oh, that would be so amazing. I don't know if I told you before, but one of my goals is to meet every single podcast guest that I've interviewed. At the moment, that's like nearly 200 people. So,
Love
um,
it.
yeah, I've met all my Perth ones, so that's really cool. But yeah, I'm working on the overseas ones now.
Yeah, that's my goal with all of our authors as well.
Mm,
So when when Jenny and I were in Australia last year, we were able to catch up with Ruth, and one of her Quiet and Badass authors, Simone, in Melbourne, and that was amazing. We've managed to catch up with one of our authors in California.
mm,
Um, but there are a bunch of our authors in the US that I'm just like, I've got to get to every state that we've got authors in. And I've actually got copies. I've got multiple copies of Lunar Wisdom. And I made Jen have multiple copies of Quiet and Badass that that each of the authors signs, so that we've got like one for each of us, and then like some special like gold copies that once it's signed by every author, like a limited edition piece
oh,
that is, will either be a prize for something, or, we'll just, yeah, for the when we're all famous, here's a signed copy of our first
yeah,
together, whatever. So, and obviously, like if I knew I was catching up with someone from one of like our other previous titles, I would also, like bring my prosperity codes copies with me so that we
yeah.
can sign those.
Sign.
Um, but yeah, I would love to do that. If I had an opportunity to meet every single one of my authors in person, and like uh, 80% of my co-authors that I've written in books with, that would be amazing, absolutely phenomenal. Because I mean, so far there's over 50 of like amongst the co-authors and the authors. There's like actually there's probably more than that, because I think my co-authors alone from other books is at least 50 people. Um, but yeah, so that's a goal. Absolutely. I think
Yeah,
it's a great goal.
yeah.
Transform those relationships from off the page or off the screen into a real life opportunity to meet up and, transcend global boundaries.
I love that. And as you were talking, I was just thinking, you know, when you connect with a group of women that are like-minded, that's another way to heal sister wound. Um,
Mm,
because it's just you just have that connection. Like, you know, you're someone that I met and we instantly hit it off, you know, when we met for the first time. And there are, you know, there's people around that you just connect with and you have no idea like why, but you just do. And those are beautiful, you know, relationships which, you know, if you can meet new people and you recognize the sister wounds and you can catch yourself, then these new relationships, you won't have that pitting against each other, you know, because you have recognized that. And I think when you, especially in book containers or podcast guests that I've met, it's just, I just love that. And I think through that has helped me heal a lot of my sister wounds, which I didn't know I had, but obviously I did. So yeah, as you were talking, it just kind of came up.
Well, and you're right. I think it's part of that as we start to do the healing and we meet those like-minded people who are also on the same journey, also on that same trajectory, also want to be making that change, and we start sticking together, right? Like whether we are actively like, hanging out in group chats or whatever it is on a regular basis, or whether like you and I, we move in like parallel circles, and then every so often our paths cross. And so we know like if we needed something, we could reach out because we are both have a very similar mission, very similar purpose. And I've always loved that about you, actually. Like, as soon as I saw that your podcast was called The Awakened Feminine, like I was in when we're in prosperity codes, and because I was doing lunar wisdom and it was all about, reconnecting with the divine feminine and the awaken, like there was just so much crossover that I was like, yes, like this girl speaks my language. And it is that curation of that circle of like-minded beings, like-minded women, that as we continue to grow and evolve and change, the other people who are on that same journey that become part of our collective, like we continue to hold hands along the way, and new people come to our circle as we, as you meet new people and I meet new people, and sometimes our circles cross over and then new connections are formed between different people in those circles. Like I know when I did Lunar Wisdom, you were so kind and generous to allow any of my authors who wanted to apply to be on your podcast to come and have a conversation with you. So it was that opportunity for us to merge and blend our worlds and our circles and connect my incredible, beautiful group of women authors with somebody else who was like-minded and willing to help their, amplify their message, but they were also then able to help further your mission of discussing how the awakened feminine showing up in the world. So it becomes this beautiful collaboration, ongoing collaboration.
Yeah, and I met some amazing women from your book, and I love them all so much, like all of them. I had them on my podcast, beautiful conversations, and I still keep in contact with a few of them. So thank you for that. I just
You're
love,
welcome. And
I
I
just love the collaboration.
Well, I also love that in a couple of weeks, one of your other guests, Tara Hazlip, is one of our Wounded Women authors. So she wrote in Broken and Burned. So
Yeah.
it's, again, it's this overlap of women who are, who have this same mission and purpose. And as we continue moving forward, I think the most important thing to remember, like you said as well, is well, you didn't say it like this, but bringing these women in, there's always room at our table, right? There's always more room. It's not that there's only one spot. It's not the old corporate ladder where there's only one position at the top. It's actually like a gigantic, long table somewhere in the Italian countryside or something, with like under a grapevine pergola or something, with lots of glasses of wine, lots of things. You know what? Somebody extra turns up for lunch, we'll just grab another chair. There's always room at our table. Come and join us, join the collective mission. We're here. However you come into the circle doesn't matter. Whether you come, whatever, what matters is that you're here.
Yes, I love that. Whew, I feel like that's the take-home message, but I want to ask you whether you've got another take-home message. I was like, oh, that's really good to end on, but
Well, I get that. Like that, I really feel like that is the take-home message, is that the secret to reconnecting with our voices, the secret to really embracing our authenticity, is actually allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, to self-reflect, and to surround ourselves with that supportive community that we need, that makes us feel safe, and to go and find that table wherever it may be, find the one that's not toxic, like find that beautiful table and allow yourself to do whatever it is that you need to do to reconnect with your voice. I know that, one of the things that also came out of Wounded Women was that recognition that sometimes awakening our inner author and allowing ourselves to share those stories, to reconnect with that voice. Like, it isn't always easy to speak our voice. We would love for it to be so easy, but, sometimes standing between those countless book ideas that we've got in notebooks, or standing, doing all of those things, is the silent inner fears and saboteurs that cause that anxiety, that fear of judgment, those sister wounds, the self-doubt. And we're worried that no one wants to hear what we have to say. So in terms of reconnecting with our voice, we need to be able to overcome that fear of, what if no one wants to hear what I have to say? What if I'm not important? And, who am I? Who am I to speak my truth, to share my voice? I'm not enough. And we all have those moments and those fears. And so, yeah, I think finding the support to work through that, and to be able to, find a network and a community of people who can support you in reconnecting with that voice and working through those fears is important. So I guess my final word on that would be, if you are struggling to get your message out there, if you are struggling to reconnect with your voice, please, please find someone who helps make you feel safe. I know Jenny and I are actually looking to launch a new Inner Author Awakening program that is designed to do exactly that, to help women to move through, activate their inner author, overcome those fears, but then also, successfully self-publish their books. So not just writing in a multi-author container, but putting their books together, and then also monetizing that and turning their book in, as part of their business. But, it's just being able to reconnect with our voice can take many forms. And at the end of the day, you've got to find the people who make you feel safe and make you feel seen and make your voice feel valuable.
Thank you so much, Tracey, for your wisdom, your lovely wisdom that I love hearing you speak, and I love talking to you. So thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your wisdom, even though I know you're not feeling well today. So thank you so much for making it through. You did amazing. So I want to just get you to share with our audience, if people want to find out more about you, your publishing company, and all the other amazing things that you do, where is the best place to find you?
Yeah, so I'm on the major platforms. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tracey Brown. If you are looking, you'll be able to find me, Tracey Brown, Divine Publishing Maven. If you are on Facebook, you can find me at Tracey Brown, or Gemini Moon Press, which is my publishing house for Lunar Wisdom, or the Women Writing Intentionally Collective. But you can basically find all of my social links, or that I do have a link tree. So it's linktr.ee/WWIC for Women Writing Intentionally Collective. And that's probably the best way to find out more about me, to find out more about the Women Writing Intentionally Collective, the books that we have coming up, other, podcast episodes that we've featured on. So we'll be adding this to our list of podcast episodes that you can catch us on, sharing our wisdom. And also we've got some free writing prompts on there as well, if anyone would like to be able to delve into their story and reflect on the sister wound, on the mother wound, on the awakened feminine, on whatever it is that you would like to dive deep and explore into. There are some free prompts on our link tree as well, so you can find us there too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tracey. Thank you once again for your time and for this beautiful conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, 𝐲𝐞𝐲.
Thank you, Tracey.